There we go. So welcome everyone to the very last Innovation Division 2025 event series. You are in for such a treat because tonight, Mr. Dale Weeks is going to share with us the global assessment of the current state of organizational excellence. He is an international respected expert in benchmarking and performance excellence with more than 40 years of experience leading transformation across the government, education, healthcare, and business sectors. As president and CEO of Global Leadership and Benchmarking Associates, he helps organizations worldwide strengthen operational performance and strategic alignment through structured results-driven benchmarking practices. From 2000 to 2011, Dale served as Senior Executive Benchmarking Officer for the Florida Department of Revenue, where he led enterprise integration of performance excellence framework across a 600 million plus agency. He also held similar leadership roles in Minnesota state government and spent 20 years in executive positions at Fortune 500 firms, including Xerox, General Mills, and Control Data Corporation. He is a frequent keynote speaker, advisor, and co-chair of the Global Benchmarking Network, and known for turning benchmarking data into strategic action. And you're going to see that he helps organizations not only assess where they are, but lead where they need to go. So let's welcome tonight Mr. Dale Weeks, our phenomenal speaker of our last session of Innovation Division's Excellence Through Quality series. Dale, over to you, sir.
Okay, thank you very much for that introduction. I'm very pleased to be here and have the opportunity to speak about this global assessment of the current state of organizational excellence. As the introduction indicated, I've had a lot of involvement in this whole quality arena. I might just say I started many years ago something called the Minnesota Council for Quality. I'm very humble in saying I was a founder of that in 1985 before the U.S. National Baldrige Program got going, and it's still in existence. So I've been in and around this excellent stuff, quality and so forth, since at least the 1980s. And then before that, so she indicated in the introduction, I worked for Xerox, which was known as a very progressive company. And so I've been very fortunate to work for organizations that are focused on quality. And I'm going to talk today about excellence as it relates to this global assessment. So let's proceed. What you see here on the first slide is the fourth.
Dale, sorry, yes. Sir, you just need to reshare your slide deck. I had to read your bio for them. I had to put up your bio, sir.
All right, let's see here. If I resume, is it there? You're seeing it now? No?
Perfect.
All right. Okay, so what you see here then, this is the fourth interim report. This assessment of the current state of organizational excellence started close to 10 years ago. And what you're seeing today and what I'll be talking about is the March of 2025 update. And so you will see what this is, what it represents on a global scale. So let's proceed to the details associated with this. Okay, what you should be seeing now is a map of the world and what this represents. This is to learn about this research study that provides a snapshot of organizational excellence in the world, a view of the global research results. It's considered leveraged by excellence community. It was started by the founder of OES, which stands for Organizational Excellence Specialists. It's an organization that exists headquartered in Canada, around Washington and Canada and Victoria. And it started by a name you should know if you get familiar with this. Don Ringrose started this over 10 years ago. And what it represents is a look at the world. And look at the numbers here. If you can see some of these, I'll just repeat some of these. We've had total participants of close to 4,000 across the world, 21 industry sectors, leadership and roles, leadership, management, and staff. So what we do is go out and assess the number of organizations involved with excellence. And then of organizations, sort of small, medium, and large. We have business, we have not-for-profit, we have government, all of those entities that are involved with this. So you see this across the world. Size of organizations. We have in the total of close to 4,000, 900 or so micro organizations, 600 smaller ones, in the medium size, 1,300 or so that are of medium size. So we've got all of these organizations that have been engaged in this effort over the last few years. Now you might want to ask, who has been doing it? What are the engagement? And what you should see here now is the research partners, first launched about 10 years ago, as I indicated, by Don Ringrose, who was involved in the American Society for Quality. It was a technical committee of the Quality Management Division of ASQ and supported by other outside organizations. And mentioned in the introduction, Global Benchmarking Network. There's an International Academy for Quality. But they put this together and said, wouldn't it be nice to know across the world of all of the, whatever the number is from the United Nations now, over 200 countries in the world, who is leading the area in terms of, or leading the arena in terms of organizational excellence? So these groups came together, but it was organizational excellence specialist, this OES organization I mentioned, Don Ringrose. But the unique thing I think here is this is an exceptional effort over 10 years by a volunteer research team. Other studies that have been done in this arena that are usually done, in most cases, done by the National Quality Board. Where I sit here in the United States, I mentioned my involvement in the 1980s. Then they became the Baldrige organization. Then there was an equivalent to the Canada organization. Then we've got New Zealand, and we got Australia. So what Don did under the auspices of these ASQ and so forth said, gee, let's put this together and let's get volunteers, those that want to raise their hand, that are not looking necessarily for just compensation. Compensation being that value data that they put together. So in an exceptional effort, the study has been done, and this is rare to know, done with zero in volunteer resources. So we researchers, we have close to 200 or so if you get everyone involved that's part of ASQ, that is part of OES, that is part of the Global Benchmarking Network, that over time, over the last 10 years, have built this assessment. And we're up to, I said in the initial slide, up to about 4,000. But if you think in terms of how many organizations are there, how many countries are there, you'll begin to see we've got a lot of work to do, and you'll hear more here in a few minutes about what that involves. So let me go on then and say, okay, what's the next step? And here I would ask some questions to get those that are on with us today, getting you involved. If you were to name one organization in any sector of the world, government, education, healthcare, whatever it is, that has sustained performance excellence for 5 or 10 years or more, could you identify just one and explain why, either in the chat or whatnot in there? And the reason I asked it is, I indicated at the outset in the introduction, I've been fortunate to work for some very progressive organizations. The Florida Department of Revenue, where I was there for the better part of 8 to 10 years. I was their executive, strange position, executive benchmarking officer. So I went out and looked at other state agencies, state tax agencies, as well as got into Canada and Europe and everything else. Florida Department of Revenue. I worked for the Minnesota Department of Revenue. And I worked for, as I indicated in the private sector, Xerox. But find one organization that has sustained performance for 5 to 10 years or more. There's not many that you can name. If anybody wants to offer some input of ones that have sustained excellence in the sense of those like myself and others who have been around this for 20, 30 years or more, which ones are continuing to do it? I can name a few. Florida Department of Revenue is still doing some of it, but we suffered from some of the issues of leadership change, and a new governor comes in for the state of Florida, or a new governor comes in from the state of Minnesota, and the commitment to excellence wanes. And some of the national, even Baldrige winners. So can anyone that wants to raise their hand or offer an idea in the chat to say, what's one organization that you would say, whether it's related to all of the principles associated with excellence or not, but what would you say is one organization that has sustained itself for 5 to 10 years or more, and some idea of why? What's been the factor contributing to that?
So we have a couple of things in the chat. We have one, Toyota, because of the Toyota way, institutionalizing excellence.
Mhm.
We have Amazon because of their business strategy and their high focus on understanding customer needs. And then we have an industry such as pharma due to the continual pipeline of potential and new medicines.
Yes. Well, those are good examples. They're out there. They're there. They've sustained themselves. As indicated, I worked for Xerox, but I also worked for these large computer companies, which were Control Data Corporation and some of the bigger ones, IBM and others that we worked with. And they were doing a lot of good things in the 1980s. However, I worked with them in the marketing arena where we would come to senior management and we would say, look, the customer is changing their expectation. There's going to be computers someday that Steve Jobs mentioned that they're going to be able to hold them in your hand. Senior management looked at us and said, not going to happen. Not going to happen. Where did Control Data go? Where did many of the large mainframe companies, IBM is still around, but they've been up and down, is they couldn't sustain it for a while. So those ones that are there, Amazon didn't exist. Google didn't exist. Apple didn't exist, but they came along. So there's examples. But what our message here within this presentation today is, how do we get more organizations so it doesn't become 1, 2, or 3, or maybe if you're really an optimist and you can find 5 or 10 that are good, to get more organizations that want to step up to excellence. So that's what I'm going to talk about, that this assessment will give you a basis for that. Okay, so what is this Organizational Excellence Framework, or OEF? This is just one, I call it a circle diagram, and it's sort of 3 levels. If you go on the inside of the circle, you see principles. Then you go the next level outside, and it's what we're calling best practices. And then on the ultimate outside, performance measurement, continuous improvement. Those are the ultimate outcome. What you do when you're all done with this excellence framework. And what Dawn has done and the others involved, the volunteers, what they have done is, I call it, make this a universal organizational framework. When you go here in the United States, they have the Baldrige thing, named after a former Secretary of Commerce. When you go to Canada, they have theirs. When you go to Australia, they have theirs. When you go to New Zealand. And so what this, Dawn has led the group to say, let's make this a universal principles and best practices that everyone can apply. And so this is the context in which we're doing this organizational excellence framework. And the reason is because what I have seen in the companies that I was fortunate to work for over the last 20, 30 years, there's been a lot of what I call flavor of the month or flavor of the year. Okay, we're going to do team stuff, or we're going to do employee engagement, or we're going to go Six Sigma, or we're going to do Lean Six Sigma, or whatever it happens to be. But those tools in and of themselves do not sustain a commitment to excellence over many years. So how do you sustain it? You sustain it by building this into the culture of the organization that goes beyond any given leadership change. A CEO comes in, a new secretary of an agency comes in the government side, a new president of a university. You sustain it by having this framework that is part of the culture. So that's what we're trying to build. And so what are the contexts? What's the principles and the best practices? And I'm not going to spend a lot of time on these. Many of you involved, I would think, know what some of them are. But you start with the principles, 9 principles. Leadership involvement down through the customer, then the employee engagement, and then this thing called process management. In most cases, you can't go to a university and get a degree in process management, or you can't get a degree in excellence. So we're going through here in 9 principles. So what you'll see as I get through this presentation today, how we've assessed an organization. It says, how well are you doing regarding the customer? How well are you doing regarding partnership, working with your suppliers on the outside? Societal commitment. It's important to be part of a community. So these are the 9 principles associated with it. And I won't define each one of these. If any of you have questions on that, I can address them. But that's the first level at the inner side of that circle that I went through. Then we've got the broader key management or best practice areas. And they're similar in name, but they're more depth in what we're assessing. We have governance, leadership, strategic planning, all the way from setting up a 5-year strategic plan, doing an assessment, to an annual plan, to individual division plan, customers, employee engagement. There's a lot in recent years. Many of you may have seen something called the Gallup organization that assesses employee engagement. And during this same period of 10 years of doing this, many organizations, if you refer to Gallup, says that 70% of employees in most organizations are not engaged, which means 20 or 30% are. So we've got a 70% opportunity, employee engagement. Work processes. How does work get done? Whether that's where Six Sigma comes in and so forth. Resource management. How well are you doing financially in managing your employees and managing your capital investment? And then the last area is how well are you doing on continuous improvement to sustain it. So we've got specific questions related to each one of these management areas. Now, next question before I get into what we have measured with this assessment, ask another question before I tell you what I think the number is here. After 40 years, I mentioned I was involved in getting the Minnesota Council for Quality going in 1985. After 40 years, what percent of organizations or people there, I mean, if you walk up to somebody in an organization, leadership, or somebody on the street and ask them, what's an organizational excellent framework? What percentage of people would you, number one, know what it is, how to apply it? What percent would you give there for that kind of a question? So Rhonda, if you can gather anything in the chat that would give people's initial reaction.
Yes, so we have, let's see. Oh, we've got some great answers here. So less than 10%. Then we have 20, less than 5%, and 15.
So we got 20, 15, 5, and 10. Okay, that's good. You're
That's
going
it.
along. Got
There,
anything else? Go
no,
ahead.
no more coming in, Dale.
All right, fine. So where we are, and this I can give you sources to go to. It's not an absolute percentage, but what Dawn Ringrose and I and others involved with this OEF assessment have come to the conclusion over this 10-year period, it's probably, I would say, 5 to 10%, if most, if you're an eternal optimist. And I can relate that back to what we've got, and you'll see the results in a few minutes. But also, there have been studies done by professors at Harvard, at Stanford Business School, not necessarily on an OEF context, but just saying, what about operational excellence? I can go back to, I think, 2017 or 18, it's probably still there, that says maybe 6, 7, 8, 10%. But the question that we're asking, why we're going forward with this assessment, is can our societies on a global basis exist when only 5 or 10% of organizations know what this stuff is? It's sort of the case you have if you're involved with metrics. There's this thing called a bell curve. And they'll say, oh, in any population of, pick a number, 100 people, you'll get 5% that's at the right hand side or the most exceptional, and then it'll break down. But the question we're continuing to ask is, can our organizations or can our societies exist when only 5 or 10% know what this is? So that means you've got 90, 85, 90% that are struggling, that are, as I would say, maybe focused on mediocrity, or they're managing by, I was told a few years ago, we're muddling by, we're just getting by, and so forth. So what we're trying to say is, we'll give you the data that we think we have, and I mentioned where we are in terms of 4,000 organizations, but we're use this as a basis for 10 years to really increase that, because I would say, as a setting a vision, that it ought to be, if I'm a head of the Baldrige organization here in the United States, or I'm the head of the equivalent one in Canada, I've been in this business for 40 years and I have 10% of the market share. That to me tells me we got a lot of growth to do. So that's why we're continuing to do this. Okay, how do we go about assessing them? Now we're going to walk through two things. One is a teaser assessment tool that you could do in any organization that you choose. And probably if you give it to on an individual basis, it'll take 5 or 10 minutes. I'm going to go through just briefly how the teaser assessment tool works. And then there's a more in-depth one. We call it a full assessment that might take a half an hour, maybe an hour, 45 minutes, depending on your awareness and your commitment within an organization. So we're going to go through what the assessment tools are, and then how do you go about doing it, and what's the benefits of doing it. So the data we're collecting from either the teaser assessment or the full-blown is identify a role in the organization. It may be somebody in a call center. It may be somebody, like I was in the Department of Revenue, where we had a mail room prior to a lot of electronic filing. So what is the role throughout an organization? If you have, pick a number, 100 employees, we would like to get employees from various roles in the entire organization, from the leadership on down. Size of organization. I mentioned briefly at the beginning, size being a micro enterprise. We're doing this with startup organizations. The startup organization may have 10 people. It may have 5 people. But to use some of these principles in managing a startup, some of the benchmarking I'm doing, the data tells us that 80 to 90% in some studies show that startups don't make it 5 years. If they're aware of some of these excellence principles, I would think they ought to, increase that. So we're looking at size of organization. We're looking at some of the larger Fortune 500 companies, yes, but also educational institutions, K through 12, as it's described in the United States, or secondary schools in other countries, industry sectors. Dawn has gone out and her team has gone and identified just about every industry sector, from the retail sector to the manufacturing sector to the whatever your sector happens to be. I've done recent benchmarking in the education side and so forth. Country, you'll see the numbers here in a few minutes. But there are if you look to the data from either the World Bank or from the United Nations, there are over 200, I think the number is 220, 225 countries in the world to ask, how is Singapore doing compared to the United States? How is Botswana in Africa doing compared to other countries? So we'll have country, self-assessment rating. So what are we rating? We're getting input quantitatively from people in terms of their assessment on the principles and best practices, but we're also getting open-ended comments. So we can really get an assessment. Okay, you rated somebody on a scale of 1 to 10 or 1 to 5. You rated your organization as being at a 3, perhaps. Why did you do that? And if you're really rating them high, you feel good about your organization, then that's what we're doing. So that's the data we're collecting. Okay, what data we're sharing? Once you and your organization, your employees get involved, we have the aggregate results. So we're not necessarily putting it out there so you can compare X or Y. If you've got a competitive, we have built into that a certain sense of confidentiality so that you're not necessarily seeing everyone. We put it out, and we have a LinkedIn site. We're putting out articles and newsletters, and then Dawn and myself and others involved have been speaking over this off and on. I mentioned this is the 4th version over the 10-year period at international conferences in various countries all over the world. Dawn Ringrose has done probably more than I have, but Australia, Brazil, Canada, Indonesia, Philippines, Slovenia. I spent some time in United Arab Emirates in Abu Dhabi in 2008. We're trying to get more, as I mentioned at the outset. And the benefit is intended to benefit all stakeholders. So it's not just the excellent community and employees, it's the working population. Because part of what we're addressing here is those involved with excellence, in whether it's in education, whether it's in government. It's for the working population as a whole to build what? Trust in government, trust in our institution. Where I sit here in the United States, we've been going through a lot in the last few years in terms of trust in our organization. And those that are willing to assess how far along they are in excellence really builds a strong position for their sustainability. Okay, let's just briefly look at the teaser assessments. This is some of the comments we get back. Management, medium size. They're involved. They're telling us how involved their leadership is. And they're telling us, what, in the case of the hospital, what they believe is excellence. And I'll go through in a minute what the rankings are by country. But these are some of the comments that we're grasping. And what Dawn does, if you've got your organization, you're in a healthcare sector, you will do comparisons with others and have these comments so they know some idea of how far along they are. Small business sector, retail. We're being in retail, we shift promotions office, so we got to know what our goals are. So these are the comments, and then here's probably more what you really want to know is, okay, for the teaser, we have 25 respondents. Not a lot out of 200 or so countries, but these are the ones that are have responded on the teasers. And you'll see the numbers here. The biggest ones, as you might expect, is United States, 200, United Arab Emirates, then we got Canada and so forth, but you see all the other ones. But what you don't see here, and this is where my benchmarking comes in, if you put your hat on of economic growth and development, the largest 10 or 15 economic countries. Japan is there, yes, but I don't see Germany. Germany's a big country, haven't done a lot there. We got a lot from United Arab Emirates, I mentioned. Yeah, we've got, let's see, we got mainland, no mainland China. So if you put these responding countries against the number of countries in the world, and then again lay it against the major economic powers in the world, not a lot are focused in that. So this case for the teasers, we have 25 countries. From those countries, India is big in that arena. 259. India has been doing a lot in terms of excellence and so forth. We have a member that's been part of our global benchmarking network for probably 10, 15, 20 years. So we've got a lot of strengths here, but yet you put the entire world in that context and we've got growth. And that's why hopefully today we're here to see if some of you be willing to help us. Summary of those that in the teaser area. What areas come out the best? Leadership. Yeah, you might expect that. Large organizations, professional and scientific. That means like consulting firms in South Asia. The most highly rated principles are leadership and the customer. The lower are prevention-based management and data-based decision making. So when you get into those areas, those are the ones we're at. So what we have when you come out, whether you do a teaser assessment or a full-blown assessment, you get the traditional sort of, it's almost like a site visit, but it's not. But it's a strengths and areas of improvement. Strengths and areas of improvement. So you're looking at what do you do next? Yes, you want to emphasize and sustain your strengths, but you want to build that. So that's the summary on a teaser level. Now, what do we do similarly on the full-blown assessment? This is one where you come in, we have the tool available for you. This is all done, and Dawn has it. You know, it's electronic focus, so there's no paper involved and whatever. But what we do is assess, again, on a more in-depth level, both quantitatively and then the comments associated with. And in this case, the principles, the ratings are a bit higher. You can see again leadership involvement, focus on the customer, those that are highest, and then you've got which ones are lowest. Prevention-based process management. So all of this focus we've had in recent years, whether it be Six Sigma, Lean, those things, there's still a lot of growth and development. Data-based decision making. So this is a scale where if you got 100%, it would be, scale of 10. So there's a lot of strength there, but there's a lot of growth. So that's where we are in terms of the principal side. And then here, if you just want to provide a sharing of what you mean by management, which kind of company, business, financial, and insurance company in Brazil, solid leadership team, management, larger government entities. So what we can do with these, once you get the data, we can go in, and that's what Dawn and I are doing now, eventually get to benchmarking, is we can sort this data by sector, by level of management, by size of organization, all of those front-end demographic criteria, we can sort it. So what we're trying to do now is get organizations to come in and say, okay, if you're in the government side and you want to compare yourself, we can sort the data. As I said, we don't necessarily give you the name and people to contact, but you can get a sense of how far along you are with your peers in your sector, or compared to eventually get to benchmarking. So if you're in the government side of things, then you don't want to just compare yourself to government. As I mentioned in my case, when I was in the Florida Department of Revenue, what did we do in terms of, this is before a lot of electronic processing, we went out and compared what we did in terms of revenue processing of paperwork. Who did we compare it to? FedEx. We took a trip to FedEx in at their offices and said, gee, FedEx, you know, processes documents. This is even before a lot of Amazon got involved, where they would say, you are guaranteed a delivery at 10:30 every morning. So we said, what can we do similarly in a tax environment to do that? So if somebody sends in a tax return, then we can give them perhaps a service level guarantee that says if you send it in on a Monday, within 2 weeks, you're going to have your return is looked at, and then you're going to get your refund. So, and then I went out and benchmarked with other organizations up in Canada, whether it be Canada Revenue Agencies and others that had such things as service level guarantees. If you applied for a passport in, I think, the province of Ontario, and they said it's going to cost you $100 and you're going to get it within 2 weeks. If they did not meet that expectation, you're going to get your money back. Money back guaranteed for a service level provided by the government. And when I share that, even with people now today in the public sector, they go, what? Government service level guarantee. So that's the kinds of feedback that we get in terms of those that feel good about what they've done. High responding countries, again, this is the full assessment that you want to look at. And here in this case, a less number of companies, 12 high responding companies to the full assessment, and where each had over 25 respondents. So we've sort of set that guideline that if you're going to go to a company and they don't have enough, at least for the larger ones, but this represents 25 or 12 responding companies to the full assessment, and they each had over 25. So we've got 12 countries here, not a lot, but again, 113 from where? Botswana in Africa, Saudi Arabia 30, United Arab Emirates again steps out. United States is 100. So UAE and the United States are pretty close in terms of raw numbers. Canada 503. A lot of people in Canada willing to look at where they're at. And so again, if you take this one, which is the full assessment, and add what I mentioned earlier under the teaser, say there's 200 or so countries in the United Nations or the World Bank's look at, we got a long way to go. So that's where we'll get to the point of saying, where can you help? Okay, what's been strongest in those areas across countries? This just gives you a quick idea of what that is. Again, leadership is done well. All the practices in this, again, are a similar case where have an overall rating of 4.98 when you look at leadership. And all practices were rating good start, meaning you're just getting going. That's scale of 2 to 5 or so. Doing well, 5 to 7.5. The highest rating here was, as you might expect, develop corporate statements on what it is. Build your strategic plan, 5.58. Senior management demonstrates commitment. So that's that front end learning curve in getting this going. But then when you get down to things like risk management, and you get things like link rewards and recognition to performance. That's things like, is your senior leadership awarded recognition, whether it be financially or otherwise, linked to performance? 4.06, not as well as many of us would like. So that's the leadership side of things and strengths. And so we have data on each one of these leadership. And then here's the comments in here that we've got. are on the leadership side. Our hospital leaders are visible, they're coming, they're walking around. And then same thing, senior leaders communicate well, and how well do you see them? Do they show up? So old adage from Tom Peters, management by walking around. And then we could walk through. I won't have time to do all of these today. Okay, leadership, planning. Where do we get? You see some of the same kind of things here. Contingency planning for things like succession planning, 3.89, not doing too well. Capability gap analysis. Okay, you're going to run into a problem in terms of financial resources, and how do you do backups? And then reallocate resources to adjust. We've had a lot during COVID where we had to reallocate resources. So the whole area of strategic planning got some work. And then again, here some memorable comments. We do quarterly planning. And so the question here is, do you have strategic plan, a business plan, operational plan across the units, and how well are they done? And then the customer piece. You would think this would be a high level, and they're doing decently here. The highest is align employees on the importance of customers' needs and expectations. But train and empower employees on what the customers want. How do you get that throughout the organization, especially for units within your business or your organization that are not immediately in sales and marketing, for example, they're close to the customer? Respond. So this gives you an idea. And again, scale up to eventually. So it's pretty rigorous scale, but we're saying even if you're halfway there, there's some growth. So you've got really strengths as related to customers. And then again, here's some memorable comments. I won't read through them all, but gives you an idea of what people are actually saying. So the summary of the principles on the full assessment teaser were similar. Leadership and involvement and focus on the customer. You would hope so, that would come to the top. But things like prevention-based process management and data-based decision making. Do you actually capture data? Data on employees, data on customers, and make your decisions on that basis. Those were rated lower. And there's a significant drop between the principles as identified in the assessment and the key management areas. Why? Because the key management areas go into a little more detail as far as what's reacted, what we're asking for. So that's where we stand in terms of those. Highest rated at the full assessment, governance, how you do the government leadership, customers, I mentioned that. But highest rated, continuous improvement. Practice, and the numbers here refer to the actual practice. So you can go back and link the quantitative response to the narrative response, and then these are where the data so far. Now this is overall on an aggregate basis for all of them. Now we can drill down if you choose to, and you have an organization, we can drill down, as I mentioned earlier, by sector, by size of organization, and so forth. Lowest rated, where is our continuous improvement? Where is our areas for improvement? Planning, work processes, suppliers, and partners. Why? These are relatively new areas. You're not, as I mentioned, there's a lot of consultants out there. There's a lot of organizations you can go to, but not through the normal leadership training and development do you get work processes. When I was at the Florida Department of Revenue, we took the entire leadership team, which was over 100 people, and trained them in Six Sigma, trained them in what we called eventually horizontal process management. And that was a major transition to go from, and that's some of the benchmarking I'm still doing today in 2025, about how many organizations have got beyond what I'll call command and control or hierarchical management, which says, What you do and how you do it depends upon what your leadership tells you to do, not driven by necessarily a horizontal business process and involvement of the customers. So that's a growth area. Suppliers and partners, that's going outside the old adage that used to exist many years ago, which was, oh, get your low cost bidder. Then people went out, you mentioned in one of our answers here, yes, Toyota. Toyota has been around for a long time, and they came through in the 1980s and were very strong competitive threat to Ford and General Motors and Chrysler at that time. But they went out and said, address your suppliers and partners by those that share your values, those that share your commitments. So you look for perhaps your suppliers and partners to be involved in excellence just like you are. And so it's not a cost consideration, a low cost consideration. It's those involved suppliers and partners in the development of your standards so that they share your commitment to excellence. So that's not as far as long as it could be. Overall conclusions. Organizations are doing quite well. Those that we've assessed, as I said, it's close to 4,000. Quite well, meaning, yeah, they're growing, they're halfway there. Maybe they're, scale of 1 to 10, they're 4, 5, 6, but more active participation from 11 industry sectors. But there's many areas we can grow on. Striving toward the sample size will benefit all because we have close to 4,000. Where we're going is try to get 9,000 to 10,000 in the next 3 to 5 years or more. Why? If you take where I worked for an extended period of time in the government side, there are thousands of organizations. That whole sense I mentioned of where are we? We have 5 or 10% of organizations within a given sector. How many of them know about it? You got 90% to work on. So we can raise that number from close to 4,000 to 9,000, 10,000. And important that leaders engage employees in a self-assessment. Because many employees, and we had this when I was at the Minnesota Department of Revenue and the Florida Department of Revenue, some employees have never been asked to do this kind of assessment. And so we went and asked people that worked in a call center, how does our leadership, and be open to that, and then develop an action plan for improvement opportunities. So this gives you, it's not going through a process where if you're applying for a national award, you fill out, you get a 40, 50 page application, and we're just giving you feedback. And then we're saying what we have in OES, we have an implementation guideline. So it just doesn't leave you sitting out there and saying, what do I do next? Well, I got these 10 strengths areas and I got 10 areas of improvement. I don't know where to start. We've got a basis for helping you. Assign responsibility of these implementations. And look externally, and that's where my role comes in. Look externally to learn from role model organizations. What have we done recently? And I have been fortunate to work with Dawn and OES. We have taken, just since September of this year, we have taken the healthcare sector globally, the higher education sector globally, the startup sector globally, the government sector globally. And we've gone out and looked at who are the top 10, 15, 20, 25 organizations that are considered role models. And then what can we do to help build this, as I said earlier, coalition of the willing, or whatever you want to call it, to help get more organizations willing to do looking at role models. So if I was like I was in the Florida Department of Revenue, we went to Canada, we went to Europe, we went to Japan, and found out what are they doing, how do they do it. It's not just a matter of I was sitting here in the state of Minnesota and we could say, yeah, we're doing better than Iowa. Oh, we're doing better than Nebraska. We went out first to all 50 states and ended up with 15 or 20. It was called a community of practice, COP, where we got together 2, 3, 4 times a year with representatives from each organization that built the community of practice and said, how well are you doing it? And eventually we brought in data from Canada, brought in data from other countries to look externally to learn from role models. And we're trying to reach within ASQ, for example, or within the Baldrige program to say, okay, Baldrige has been around for 35 years, but they don't necessarily, unless on an ad hoc basis, step out and do global benchmarking. So it's important that leaders look externally. It's what Dawn and I did a presentation here a few years ago, which still active, which says if you're going to go to the Olympics, meaning the Olympics in the sports arena, you look out and who's the world competition? If somebody can run the 100-yard dash in 9 seconds and yours is 16, you don't just go and look. So you got to be willing to step out and look at who those role model organizations. So we're building a focus on getting the national Baldrige organizations and national in other countries to focus in. So what's next? What's the future hold for this? Well, the study will continue from its original with either the teaser or best practice, and we're trying to get from long-term organizational success for improving, but to get that to the point where it's not 4,000, it's 9,000, 10,000 organizations, that we can go in, as I described it to Dawn a few months ago. Sort of what, if any of you got involved to that level, I do metrics, so have for many years. You can go out like that map I had at the beginning, and you have a map of the entire world, and you want to click on wherever you are. If you're in the United States, you click on the United States. If you're in Canada, if you're in Singapore, you can click on a country and find out who's doing the best. This is what I've done for formal benchmarking, to be able to go and get that data. So it's not waiting for a formal one-time big site visit related entity. It's having that database. And that's where we're trying to build with these national organizations, the ASQ if they're interested, or Baldrige, or Global Benchmarking Network and others, to be able to go to the map of the United States and say, okay, or the world, and say, who's doing it? Like you could do with COVID. You could find out with some data that was put together by various universities, you could log on and find the US versus, Singapore or Germany or whatever. The same thing regarding performance excellence. So it's a platform for organizations that say the benefits are far reaching. So that's what we're working on. Why we're doing that? Because it has been proven for those where, in my case, being fortunate, working for organizations that were committed to those, but those that have been there, to get back to that question I had at the beginning. How many organizations? It's not 5 or 10. So I could sit here and pick a number 5 years from now, and we would have 20, 30, 40, 50% of organizations that are committed to that. So that's what we're about. So my sort of concluding slide is staying involved. Name one organization. When we're done here today, whether you do it in the chat room or afterward, if you can name one global sector organization that you would recommend, just one for a teaser, full IF. If we've got whatever our number is, 50, 60, 70, 80 people, whatever it is, that's a handful of organizations that would be willing to do it. So staying involved with your next step, to choose one organization. Maybe it's just you personally that you're not working for them, but as I said, what we have in this is a lot of volunteers. So you may want to go to your dentist, you may want to go to your doctor or your healthcare. Maybe you got a hospital you go to, and they would be willing. So one basis for raising your hand and saying, here's one organization that you would recommend now for a teaser or full OEF assessment. And we have this, as I mentioned, mechanized process. You go to OEF or OES, and Dawn can send it to you. You do it. It's done within a day or two. And unless there's follow-up, though, all of this is done on the front end. And depending on how extensive the organization, very minimal cost involved to go through this process. So that's where we would like to say it. And then you broaden that and say, okay, what's our broader global call to action? Is become a volunteer. Some of these we've got on papers. I mentioned 100, 200 people that have been part of this in one way or another. To, again, increase the percent of organization in all sectors that know what OEF is. If I was there, and I've talked to some of the Baldrige ones that said, gee, you've been around for 40 years and you got 10% of the organization. To actually understand and know what it is, actually use it to accelerate performance. So what we're trying to do is not get incremental change. We're going to get what I call quantum leap changes, or whatever you want to call it, that's accelerating to get more organizations. Because when you look at the data and the problems we face in terms of, all of us went through COVID to one degree. That was a healthcare scare. But then you've got climate change, and then you've got what we're facing here in the US. And there's a lot of institutions that need help. So we're saying OEF and a focus on performance excellence. So what does that mean? Help us substantially increase our global sample to 9,000 teaser and full assessment. So join your peers in this. It's not a big commitment. It just said, I mentioned in the earlier statement, one organization, or if you can get a handful to increase that percentage, so I can be here in 5 or 10 years and say, gee, there's 20% of organizations that are involved with excellence. Because once you get this, it's sort of contagious. I mean, I've been with it for 30, 40 years. It's what Dr. Deming, if you've been following some of the prior history, or Dr. Duran, I've been fortunate. They came to Minnesota many, many years ago. And I'm trying to do something for them as far as global benchmarking. Robert Camp, who worked at Xerox, we're trying to build that legacy that says, gee, we want to sort of like the Boy Scout oath, which says, not oath, but theme, which says, leave the world better than when you came. Well, when we look at climate change and other things out, we're probably not at that level. So what you can do, and those with your peers and your colleagues and so forth, is say who would want to join this effort and be part of what we're calling worldwide collaboration. So what exists today, yes, we've been fortunate in having a lot of people involved. But when you look at trying to get our national Baldrige involved in the U.S., Canada involved, all of these groups, they tend to want to stay, it's called, in their own lanes or their own smokestack. We're trying to say collaboration is the solution, not each one goes its own way and you end up, to use the economic term, an invisible hand takes over. So if you're willing to be part of this call to action, we'd welcome you, and I'll be open for any questions you got now, or you could send them to me. I've got in the slides you'll get and so forth. This is who I am. I'll have my phone number and email and everything else. But all of this you can, most all of it, except when you get to some of the reports, you can go online to our Organizational Excellence Specialist webpage, and it's all available. Don has done an extraordinary job of putting all these reports out there, where it's been, it's just amazing. We've got a YouTube channel that we've gone, and we do monthly, if not more frequently, webinars. I'm doing another one shortly on the benchmarking and so forth. So you're welcome to go on, find out, and let Dawn know, let me know, and become a part of it. So I'll stop now, say thank you for listening, and I'll take whatever questions we've got in time left. Hope to.
Thank you so much. We have like 1 minute, Dale. So
Okay.
if somebody has a quick question here, if you want to put it into the chat, we'll give you them just a little bit. But how about if we lob this one at you? This is kind of a nice ending one, and that's really, how can organizations move from assessment to acceleration, using the data not just to measure performance, but to rather lead transformation from your phenomenal findings, Dale?
Well, I would say there, if you go through the assessment, or even if you've been fortunate enough to go through, a site visit with some of these awards, then the question is, you come back and you have this sort of list of strengths and areas of improvement. And there it's just a matter of, if you're just getting going, if you want to explore further what this is, you want to choose with some degree of strategic thinking about what are your top, maybe just 2 or 3 items that you want to pursue, whether it be, when I went through some of those principles, whether it be leadership, or maybe it's look at 1 or 2 of the areas for improvement, and just begin to act on that and see immediately the benefits that comes from that. If you choose 1 or 2 of those principles, or of those best practices, and move forward on that, and then see the result of that, then you'll get hopefully those aha moments and those things that said, gee, this stuff works, especially when you go out and do eventually getting your data, but then do some kind of introductory benchmark that says, gee, let me compare this to something like we did, going to, FedEx or whatever, and listen to people that have been through this, and listen to how they feel about coming to work every day. And that whole sense of, I mentioned about Gallup and so forth, say people are engaged. What does it mean to be engaged? Maybe initially just in those 1 or 2 areas that you wanted to pursue. And that hopefully will set the foundation to say, gee, let's go to that next level. And then you can expand that. So it doesn't mean a lot of complexity. And you got to take, as Don would say, take the whole elephant. Take 1 or 2 and work that, to the point of having some conversations with others that have been down that, and that will drive your improvement, hopefully. So.
Thank you. That is absolutely perfect, Dale. And I think we're going to wrap. You're getting great 5-star reviews, great presentation. Thank you. Love the principles. Framework is awesome. So what we're going to do is we're going to put the rest of our seed questions into a ASQ innovation division discussion, and then we're going to be able to point to your contact information so that you'll have that, Dale, and that they'll have your information, and we'll of course send your deck and the follow-up recertification units. Again, everyone, thank you so much. I'm just going to switch over to our closing slides for tonight, and just let you know that, of course, on behalf of our ASQ Innovation Division officers, Tracy Owens, Jackie Jolly, Sonia Montera, Miss Rebecca Mott, and Mr. Larry Miller, we are so grateful for you wrapping up our 2025 season with us with such a fine, esteemed speaker such as Mr. Dale Weeks. So again, a big hand to our phenomenal speaker, and we invite you to fill out our 2026 speaking proposals if you have a topic that's of interest to you, and we invite you to our upcoming events. You are in for a treat. We're leading off 2026 strong with a panel, a multi-divisional panel that's really looking at innovation cross sectors, and then examining how we can unlock innovation with some new appreciation techniques that really help drive the dialogue with the stakeholders, and then wrapping up our first quarter or into second quarter with leading at the crossroads of innovation, AI, and the future of leadership, which is again going to be a cross-divisional look at this topic. We also have a March speaker that we just put in there today, so you're going to have a phenomenal 2026. Mr. Dale Weeks, thank you for your service to the ASQ Innovation Division. Thanks for all of what you and Don do around the globe, sharing this information. And folks on the line, we will post this so you can have these actionable insights for your organization's leaders and teams no later than first thing tomorrow. So again, happy holidays, happy upcoming New Year 2026. And Dale, thank you for all you do for us. Good night, everyone. And we look forward to rejoining with all of you again in our 2026 season.
Okay, bye-bye. Enjoyed doing it.
Thank you.